Hi there, this is part B of part one for the permitted development rights explained for homeowners. And I'm here going to this next stage because I realized that it would be really helpful to you to explain how permitted development rights are structured so that you can actually find what it is that you're looking for. So that's what I'm going to explain in this video. This video is a signpost for you so you know where to go to check if what you're wanting to do is actually within permitted development, also known as PD. And so the rules of permitted development are structured in parts. So part 1, 2, 3, etc. And each part is split into classes. For example, part 1, class A, class B, class C, and so on. So these rules are what allow you to know if you can make these changes to your home within permitted development, which means that you wouldn't have to apply for planning permission. And if you can't do what you're thinking about doing within permitted development, that's okay. It just means that either you adjust the design of what you're wanting to do so that it does fit within permitted development, or it means that you simply apply for planning permission, which isn't actually such a big deal to do that. It does add a little bit of time, sometimes a lot of time, but if it's not too complex, it's not too big, and it's not too contentious, then it doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of time. It's a matter of several months, not necessarily more than that. And it does cost a bit more. It can cost between £700 to £1,000 or a couple of thousand, depending on the scale of what you're doing, the complexity of it, and so on. You know how that goes through planning. But if you're thinking, okay, I don't want to go have the hassle of planning, I don't want to have that extra cost of planning, and I don't want to add the extra time that it takes to go through planning approval, then building and making alterations that are only within permitted development makes sense. But it's not the only thing to be aware of. When you're making changes to your home, you need to also make sure that it also complies with any covenants, easements, and restrictions that may be within your ownership, the deeds of your property. And it's worthwhile getting a specialist solicitor to check your deeds to make sure that there are no restrictions in there that don't allow you to do things. I'll give you an example with my own home. There is a covenant in my deeds that says I'm not allowed to have a roof that is a gable end. It has to be a hipped roof. And for some reason, I'm also not allowed to make bricks in my garden. I mean, I'm not particularly interested in doing that, so it doesn't affect me. But there are these strange random restrictions that might be in your deed, so it's worth having a read through. You may well read through it and be able to identify very easily yourself. But if it looks complicated, there's some things that you want to change, you can look to possibly seeking changes to them. Then you need to go to a solicitor who specialises in that kind of thing. And the other thing you need to take into account are building regulations and the Party Wall Act. So these are other pieces of legislation that affect what you're allowed to do, and not in terms of like not being allowed to do it, but in terms of needing to get permissions and agreements in place to be able to do it legally. So this is only about planning legislation, permitted development, and let's get into it. So, and before I do, hello, I'm Jane. I'm a chartered architect, and I would really love it if you would hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more information about house extensions, home design. It really helps me to grow the channel, and it really helps other homeowners like you to find this information that they may be struggling to find and really be looking for. So if you could hit the like and subscribe, I would be ever so grateful. So the parts of the permitted development legislation that are most relevant to homeowners are Part 1, Part 2, and Part 14. And I'm going to go into Part 1 in most detail because Part 1 is the main one. It's the one that deals with the extensions and the loft conversion, dormer, extension, and changing windows and all of those sorts of things. All the bigger changes that you might want to make to your house, that's what the Part 1 is dealing with. So we'll go into that in more detail. So Part 1 Class A is it's the biggest, most complex part of the whole thing, really, and it's what deals with the enlargement, improvement, and alteration. So if you're thinking of extending your home, adding onto your home in some place, then this Part 1 Class A is where you'll find the information about what you're allowed to do, where you're allowed to extend, how big you're allowed to extend that. Part 1 Class B and Class C are both related to roofs. Class B is related to alterations or additions to the roof. So that might be a dormer, adding a dormer on, or it might be changing the shape of your roof. For example, if I wanted to change my roof from a hipped roof to a gable roof, which I already said I'm not allowed to do from my deeds, but if I wanted to do it, it would be related to this Part 1 Class B. And Part 1 Class C is other kinds of roof alterations, like changing the finish of the roof. So if you wanted to go from slate to clay, for example, or if you wanted to add some roof lights. Part 1 Class D is about porches. So if you were to add a porch onto the front of your house, there are limitations around what is allowed within permitted development. There is a porch addition that you are allowed to do, but the size of it, the shape of it, and things like that, those are restricted. So you have to do it within those restrictions if you want it to be within permitted development. Part 1 Class E is all about additional garden buildings. So these could be, a little space for a shed, or a shed for a sauna, or a jacuzzi, or a hot tub, or it could be storage for the garden tools, or it could be a home office, something like that in the garden. So that's what this Part 1 Class E deals with, that kind of additional buildings that are not part of your main house, but that sit separately in your garden. Part 1 Class F is about hard surfaces. So this could be driveways, it could be a patio to the back garden. So these hard surface areas, hard landscaping, pavers, block paving, resin bound paving, all of these things, there are restrictions around what you can and can't do for these. So you need to meet those restrictions for it to be permitted development. And if you don't, then you need to apply for planning permission for hard landscaping. Part 1 Class G is all about chimneys, flues, and soil vent pipes. Chimneys, I think, are obvious. Most of us know that that's where if you have a fireplace, that's where it extracts the smoke and what have you from that. Flues is nothing to do with COVID or getting sick or anything like that. Flues are the extract pipe that goes through. It could be through the roof, it could be through a wall, that usually it's connected to something like a vent or a boiler, and you might see steam and things coming out of it, and it's just extracting stale air or stuff from a boiler. So it could be from your bathroom or from a utility room. So if you were altering internally and putting a new utility room or changing a room into a bathroom, and you need to add an extract vent, because that's part of building control, you need to have extract vents for a bathroom or a utility or a kitchen, then the placement of that, you need to check within Part 1 Class G if you are allowed to do that within permitted development. And a soil vent pipe is that really large pipe which all your toilet waste drains out through. Part 1 Class H is to do with antenna and satellite dishes. I mean, I don't know how this is particularly useful to people these days. Most of us, well, I mean, I do. I have fiber internet, so I don't have an antenna or a satellite dish on my home at all. I did at one time, but no longer. But if you wanted to have an antenna or a satellite dish, this would be where you go to check if you wanted to add that. I think it's not that usual anymore. So that was part 1. Now in part 2, there are also several classes. I'm not going to go down through part 2 in as much detail because it's more about external details, the gates, the fences, the walls, if you want to paint externally, adding charging points for electric vehicles, adding CCTV cameras, these sorts of things. So if you are doing any of those, then you need to go and check in part 2. And then in part 14, that's all about domestic microgeneration equipment. So that could be solar panels, it could be air source heat pumps, the white boxes. It could be, like a wind turbine type of thing. They're not particularly common, they're not particularly effective for most houses. But if you have a house that has one, that's where it would be, or you want one, that's where you would look in part 14 for the class around that deals with the limitations and restrictions on those things and what you're allowed to do. So when you have an idea of what you want to do, then you need to check that if you're not wanting to apply for planning permission. I mean, if you're happy to apply for planning permission, then you don't need to check it. Or if you work with somebody like me, then you also don't need to check it, because that's something that I would do as part of my role. But if you are doing it yourself and you want to check if the things that you're thinking about doing are permitted development, and if you are going to need to apply for planning permission, then you need to go through all of these rules and you must tick yes, it meets permitted development requirements for it to be permitted development. So if, for example, your project, your proposal, your idea, it meets class part 1A but not part 1B, then just because it meets part 1A does not mean it's permitted if it doesn't also meet part B, part C, and every other category. It has to be a yes for everything for it to be permitted. If it's a no for anything, then it's not permitted, and you're going to have to make some adjustments to the design or submit a planning application. So if you've gone through that process and it doesn't apply, then I can help you. If you are interested in getting my help and helping you to do what it is that you want to do to your home to make the alterations you want to make, then that's something I can help you with. Whether you are looking to DIY it, I have resources that I can help you with there, or whether you're looking for more of a premium service and you want me to work with you and do things for you, then I can offer that as well. So look in the description below for details about that. And on the screen, you're going to see a playlist which has all of my videos that are related to planning applications, as well as a recommended video that YouTube thinks you will like to watch next. And yeah, I'd love to help you. If you do need help, have a look in the description, and hopefully I'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.